The tension in the communications center was thick enough to cut with a knife as Rodriguez stepped closer to Maria's workstation, his hand now resting openly on the grip of his sidearm. The casual pretense was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of someone who had been backed into a corner and was prepared to fight his way out. "Santos, I think you know more than you're letting on," Rodriguez said, his voice dropping to a whisper that wouldn't carry beyond the room. "And I think we both know that could be a problem for everyone involved." Maria remained seated, her posture relaxed despite every muscle in her body being coiled like a spring. Years of training had taught her to appear harmless while preparing for explosive action, and she could feel her grandmother's techniques flowing through her consciousness like water finding its natural course. "I'm just a communications specialist, Sergeant," Maria replied, her voice steady and unremarkable. "I monitor radio traffic and file reports. Nothing more complicated than that." Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "See, that's where you're wrong. You've been picking up transmissions that you shouldn't understand, asking questions that you shouldn't need to ask. That makes you more than just a communications specialist. That makes you a problem." The coded transmissions continued crackling through the equipment behind them, each message bringing the ambush closer to execution. Maria could hear updates on positioning, confirmations of timing, final preparations for an attack that would devastate Bravo team unless she found a way to stop it. But first, she had to deal with the immediate threat standing 3 feet away from her. Rodriguez drew his sidearm with practiced smoothness, holding it low but pointed in her direction. "I need to know exactly what you figured out, Santos. And I need to know who else you've talked to about it." Maria's training kicked into high gear, her awareness expanding to encompass every detail of her surroundings. The communications center was 12 feet by 14 feet, with 2 exits, the main door that Rodriguez was now blocking, and a maintenance access panel that led to the equipment rooms. The nearest weapon was Rodriguez's sidearm, but there were also improvised weapons within reach, a heavy radio handset, a metal clipboard, even the chair she was sitting in. Most importantly, Rodriguez was making the mistake of talking instead of acting. He wanted information before eliminating the threat, which gave Maria precious seconds to prepare her response. Her grandmother had taught her that the most dangerous moment in any confrontation was when the enemy was still deciding what to do. "Sergeant, I think there might be some misunderstanding here," Maria said, slowly raising her hands in a gesture that appeared submissive but actually positioned her arms for action. "If you're concerned about operational security, maybe we should involve Captain Morrison." Rodriguez shook his head. "Morrison's not part of this conversation. This is between you and me, and it's going to stay that way." "Now, what exactly did you hear in those transmissions?" The question confirmed what Maria had suspected. Rodriguez needed to know how much she understood before deciding whether she could be silenced or eliminated. He was still thinking like someone in control of the situation, someone who believed he held all the advantages. Maria began to shift her weight, a subtle movement that prepared her body for explosive action while appearing to be nothing more than nervous fidgeting. "I heard some background noise on the secondary channels. Arabic chatter, but I don't speak the language, so I couldn't understand what they were saying." Rodriguez's expression showed relief, and Maria knew she had given him the answer he wanted to hear. He believed she had detected the transmissions, but couldn't decode them, which made her a manageable threat rather than an immediate danger to the operation. "That's good, Santos. That's very good. The thing is, that Arabic chatter is part of an ongoing intelligence operation. Highly classified stuff that you don't have clearance to know about. The problem is, now that you've detected it, we have to figure out what to do about that." Maria nodded as if she understood, playing along with his explanation while calculating distances and angles. Rodriguez had relaxed slightly, confident that he was dealing with someone who posed no real threat to his plans. His weapon was still pointed in her direction, but his grip had loosened, and his attention was focused on her face rather than her body position. "I understand the need for security, Sergeant," Maria said, beginning to lean forward as if preparing to stand. "Whatever you need me to do to maintain operational security, I'm ready to comply." Rodriguez smiled, the expression cold and predatory. "I knew you'd see reason, Santos. You always struck me as someone who understood how things work around here. The thing is, This particular operation requires a higher level of security than usual. People who know about it have to be absolutely trustworthy. Maria could hear the threat in his words, could see the decision forming behind his eyes. Rodriguez had concluded that she was too much of a risk to leave alive, regardless of what she claimed to understand. Her knowledge of the transmissions, combined with her position in the communications center, made her a liability that needed to be eliminated. The realization triggered something deep in Maria's psyche, something that had been carefully controlled and concealed for years. Her grandmother's training surged to the surface, bringing with it skills that transformed her from prey into predator in the space of a heartbeat. Rodriguez was still talking, still explaining why she had to die, when Maria exploded into motion. She launched herself from the chair with explosive force, her left hand deflecting Rodriguez's gun arm, while her right hand drove upward toward his throat. The movement was fluid, precise, and utterly silent, exactly as her grandmother had taught her. Rodriguez's eyes widened in shock as he realized that the harmless communications specialist had just transformed into something deadly. The gun discharged once, the bullet embedding itself in the ceiling as Maria's strike connected with Rodriguez's windpipe. He staggered backward, gasping for air, but Maria was already moving again. Her grandmother had taught her that the first strike was just the beginning. True survival required following through until the threat was completely neutralized. Maria's second strike was a precise blow to Rodriguez's solar plexus, delivered with all the force her compact frame could generate. Rodriguez doubled over, his weapon falling from nerveless fingers as his body fought for oxygen. But Maria wasn't finished. Years of suppressed anger, years of being dismissed and underestimated, years of watching inferior soldiers receive recognition for skills she possessed in abundance. All of it poured out in a series of lightning-fast strikes that left Rodriguez unconscious on the floor within seconds. The entire confrontation had taken less than 30 seconds, and it had been conducted in almost complete silence. To anyone outside the communications center, nothing had happened. Rodriguez had simply disappeared from view behind the equipment racks, leaving Maria alone with her unconscious prisoner and the continuing coded transmissions that marked time toward disaster. Maria stood over Rodriguez's still form, breathing heavily not from exertion but from the emotional release of finally using skills she had hidden for so long. Her grandmother's training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality of violence was different from the controlled exercises in Elena's garage. She quickly secured Rodriguez's weapon and checked his pulse, confirming that he was unconscious but alive. Her grandmother had taught her to kill when necessary, but Maria's conscience demanded that she avoid lethal force unless absolutely required. Rodriguez was neutralized as a threat, and that was sufficient for now. The coded transmissions were reaching fever pitch, and Maria realized that time was running out. Rodriguez's absence would be noticed soon, and the ambush was scheduled to begin in less than 2 hours. She needed to alert Captain Morrison, but she also needed proof that would support her incredible story. Maria began searching through Rodriguez's personal effects, looking for evidence of his treachery. His notebook contained what appeared to be routine duty assignments, but Maria's trained eye detected subtle patterns in the timing and locations that corresponded to intelligence that had been transmitted to enemy forces. More damning was Rodriguez's personal communication device, which contained message logs that painted a clear picture of his activities. Encoded within routine military communications were detailed reports on squadron movements, supply schedules, and personnel assignments. The evidence was overwhelming, but it also raised disturbing questions about how long Rodriguez had been operating and how many previous missions had been compromised. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside sent Maria into immediate alert mode. Someone was approaching the communications center, and she had only seconds to decide how to handle the situation. Rodriguez was unconscious on the floor, his weapon was in her possession, and the evidence of his treachery was scattered across his workstation. Lieutenant Chun appeared in the doorway, her expression shifting from routine concern to alarm as she took in the scene. "Santos, what happened here? Where's Rodriguez?" Maria made a split-second decision that would determine the fate of everyone involved. "Ma'am, Sergeant Rodriguez is a traitor." He's been feeding intelligence to enemy forces, and there's an ambush planned for Bravo Team's mission this afternoon. Chin's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm as she processed Maria's words. Santos, that's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have? Maria gestured toward Rodriguez's communication device and notebook. Coded transmissions hidden in routine traffic, detailed intelligence reports, coordination with hostile forces. It's all there, ma'am. Rodriguez has been operating for months, possibly longer. Chin approached cautiously, her eyes moving between Maria and the unconscious Rodriguez. And you discovered this how exactly? The question Maria had been dreading since the morning finally arrived. There was no way to explain her knowledge without revealing capabilities she wasn't supposed to possess. The mess hall buzzed with the usual afternoon chatter as soldiers grabbed quick meals between duties. But Maria Santos sat alone at a corner table, her untouched sandwich growing stale while her mind raced through possibilities. She had less than 3 hours before Bravo Team departed for what they believed would be a routine supply escort, and the coded transmissions she had intercepted painted a very different picture. Her notebook lay open beside her tray, filled with what appeared to be routine communication logs, but actually contained her analysis of the hostile intelligence network she had uncovered. Every few minutes, she glanced around the mess hall, studying faces, noting who seemed relaxed and who appeared tense. Somewhere among these familiar faces was a traitor, someone who had been feeding information to enemy forces for weeks, possibly months. Sergeant Rodriguez entered the mess hall with his usual swagger, grabbing a tray and joining the line. Maria watched as he moved through the space, noting how he greeted different soldiers, whose conversations he joined, whose tables he avoided. His behavior seemed normal, but there was something about his earlier glance at her workstation that continued to bother her. Lieutenant Chun sat 2 tables away, reviewing maps with Captain Morrison and Master Sergeant Kevin Torres, the squadron's most experienced non-commissioned officer. Torres had served 3 combat deployments and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen everything the battlefield could offer. His opinion carried weight with Morrison, and his approval could make or break a career. Maria found herself studying Torres more carefully than she had before. His position gave him access to virtually all operational intelligence, and his experience would allow him to communicate covertly without arousing suspicion. But Torres had also saved her life during a mortar attack 6 months earlier, throwing himself across her position when shrapnel started flying. It seemed impossible that such a man could be working with enemy forces. The coded transmissions had revealed more than just the planned ambush. The enemy force knew about backup procedures, response times, and even the specific armor configurations of the vehicles in Bravo Team's convoy. This level of detail suggested someone with intimate knowledge of squadron operations, someone who had been observing and reporting for an extended period. Private First Class Michael Kumar approached her table hesitantly, carrying a message folder. At 19, Kumar was the newest member of the communications team, eager to prove himself, but still uncertain about military protocol. Sergeant Santos, this came in for you from headquarters, he said, handing her the encrypted message. Thank you, Kumar, Maria replied, accepting the folder while noting the young soldier's nervous demeanor. Kumar had been acting strangely all week, avoiding eye contact and seeming jumpy whenever anyone approached his workstation. His behavior could indicate guilt, or it could simply reflect the stress of adapting to military life. Maria opened the message and found routine administrative updates that could have waited until the next day. The timing of the delivery struck her as odd, almost as if someone wanted to confirm her location during the lunch hour. She made a mental note to investigate Kumar's recent activities more thoroughly. As she folded the message, Maria noticed Rodriguez watching her from across the mess hall. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away, but not before she caught something in his expression that set off alarm bells. Rodriguez knew something, and his interest in her activities was more than casual curiosity. Her grandmother had taught her to trust her instincts, especially when those instincts whispered of danger. Your body will know before your mind does, Mija, Elena had said during one of their training sessions. Listen to the voice that tells you to be careful, because that voice has kept our family alive for generations. The voice was speaking now, clear and urgent. Maria was being watched, and the person watching her was connected to the intelligence leak. Her discovery of the coded transmissions had not gone unnoticed, and her careful inquiries had attracted the wrong kind of attention. She needed to act quickly, but she also needed proof. Accusations without evidence would be dismissed, especially coming from a communications specialist with no apparent expertise in counterintelligence. Worse, making false accusations could end her military career and eliminate any chance she had of preventing the ambush. Maria finished her meal mechanically, her mind working through various scenarios. The ambush was scheduled for 1600 hours, when Bravo team would be deep in the mountain pass with limited options for escape or reinforcement. The attacking force would have high ground, superior numbers, and the element of surprise. Without intervention, it would be a massacre. She returned to the communications center to find Corporal Wright struggling with the equipment, his inexperience showing as he attempted to manage multiple frequency bands simultaneously. The coded transmissions were continuing, but Wright was clearly missing them entirely, focused on the routine traffic that occupied the primary channels. "Need some help, right?" Maria offered, settling back into her station despite being officially off duty. Wright looked relieved. "I can't seem to isolate this interference on Channel 7. It's making the whole frequency band unstable." Maria took control of the console and immediately recognized that the interference Wright was detecting was actually the coded transmissions she had been monitoring. Someone was being less careful about concealment, perhaps rushing to finalize details for the afternoon operation. As she worked to clarify the signals, Maria became aware of movement behind her. Rodriguez had entered the communications center and was standing close enough to observe her work. Too close for casual interest. "Problem with the equipment, Santos?" Rodriguez asked, his tone neutral but his positioning suggesting he was trying to see her screen. "Just some routine interference," Maria replied, adjusting the controls to hide the coded transmissions while appearing to work on Wright's original problem. "Nothing serious." Rodriguez nodded, but he didn't move away. Instead, he lingered near her station, observing her work with an intensity that confirmed Maria's suspicions. He was the source of the intelligence leak, and he was now concerned that she might discover his activities. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Rodriguez had access to all the information being transmitted to enemy forces. His position as senior communications non-commissioned officer gave him the technical knowledge to hide transmissions within routine traffic. His dismissive attitude toward female soldiers provided perfect cover for underestimating her ability to detect his activities. Most damning of all, Rodriguez had been present at every briefing where the compromised intelligence was discussed. He knew Bravo team's route, their timing, their backup procedures, and their vehicle configurations. He had been in position to observe her work all morning, to notice when she began detecting patterns in the coded transmissions. Maria continued working at the console, her movements steady and professional while her mind raced through the implications of her discovery. Rodriguez was not just leaking intelligence. He was actively working to ensure the success of the ambush. His questions about her combat experience, his lingering presence at her workstation, his obvious interest in her activities all pointed to someone preparing to eliminate a threat to his operation. She needed to get word to Captain Morrison, but she couldn't do it while Rodriguez was watching. Any attempt to communicate her suspicions would alert him to her knowledge and potentially trigger a response that could endanger everyone on the base. Wright finished his work and prepared to leave, gathering his notes and checking his watch. "Thanks for the help, Sergeant. I think I've got everything under control now." "No problem," Maria replied, noting that Rodriguez's attention sharpened when Wright mentioned leaving. Once Wright was gone, Rodriguez would have her alone in the communications center, with access to all the equipment and the perfect opportunity to eliminate the threat she represented. As Wright headed for the door, Maria made her decision. "Wright, hold on. I need you to deliver a message to Captain Morrison. Tell him I've detected irregular patterns in communications traffic and recommend immediate review of this afternoon's mission parameters." Wright nodded and continued toward the door, but Rodriguez stepped into his path. "I'll handle that communication, Wright. Santos, what specifically have you detected?" The question was asked casually, But Maria recognized the trap. Rodriguez needed to know exactly what she had discovered, how much she understood, and whether her knowledge posed a threat to the operation. His positioning near the door also blocked her primary exit route, turning the communications center into a potential trap. Maria's training took over, her awareness expanding to encompass every detail of her surroundings. Rodriguez was armed with his sidearm, positioned to control the room, and clearly prepared to take action if necessary. But he was also overconfident, still seeing her as a communications specialist rather than recognizing the danger she actually represented. "Just some background noise on the secondary frequencies," Maria replied, her voice remaining calm while her body prepared for action. "Probably atmospheric interference, but worth checking given this afternoon's mission." Rodriguez relaxed slightly, apparently satisfied that she hadn't detected the coded transmissions. "I'll take a look at it after Wright delivers his message. No need to bother the captain with technical issues." But Wright was already gone, and Maria realized that Rodriguez had maneuvered her into exactly the position he wanted. Alone in the communications center, isolated from help, with a plausible explanation for any unfortunate accident that might occur. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. When cornered, "Mija, remember that your greatest strength is being underestimated. Let them think they know you, and then show them how wrong they are." Rodriguez moved closer to her workstation, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. "Santos, I think we need to have a conversation about what you've been monitoring today. Some of the patterns you've been tracking might be more sensitive than you realize." Maria nodded, appearing cooperative while calculating distances, angles, and response times. Rodriguez was 3 feet away, focused on her face, expecting compliance from someone he saw as harmless. He had no idea that he was within range of a woman who had spent 15 years learning to disable opponents twice her size without making a sound. "I understand your concern, Sergeant," Maria replied, slowly turning in her chair to face him fully. The movement positioned her body for action while appearing natural and unthreatening. "What kind of sensitivity are we talking about?" Rodriguez's expression hardened as he realized she was asking questions instead of providing answers. His hand moved closer to his weapon, and Maria knew the moment of decision had arrived. In seconds, he would either attempt to silence her permanently or retreat and abort the entire operation. Neither option was acceptable. Maria had spent 3 years hiding her capabilities, 3 years allowing herself to be dismissed and underestimated, 3 years preparing for a moment exactly like this one. The choice between concealment and action was no longer hers to make. Rodriguez had forced her hand, and now both their lives hung in the balance. The coded transmissions continued in the background, each message bringing the ambush closer to reality. 23 soldiers were preparing for a mission that would become their death trap unless she found a way to stop it. Rodriguez stood between her and that goal, confident in his control of the situation, unaware that he had just awakened something that had been sleeping in the shadows for far too long. Elena Santos had trained her granddaughter for moments like this, moments when hiding was no longer an option, when survival depended on skills that few would expect from a quiet communications specialist. The old woman's teachings stirred to life as Maria prepared to show Rodriguez exactly how wrong he had been about her capabilities. The real battle was about to begin, and it would be fought not in the mountains where the ambush waited, but here in the communications center, between a traitor who thought he held all the cards and a woman who had spent her entire military career preparing for this single moment of truth. The morning sun cast long shadows across Forward Operating Base Phoenix as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her headset and settled into her position at the communications console. The familiar hum of radio chatter filled the cramped space, voices crackling through static as various units checked in from their positions scattered across the valley below. To anyone watching, she appeared exactly as she had every morning for the past 8 months, focused, competent, and unremarkable. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the screen as he studied the latest intelligence reports. At 34, Morrison had earned his reputation through decisive action and an uncanny ability to bring his people home alive. His squadron of 12 soldiers had completed 43 missions without a single casualty, a record that spoke to both skill and luck in equal measure. "Santos, get me a clear channel to Bravo team," Morrison called out without looking away from the display. "They're running 15 minutes behind schedule, and I want to know why." Maria's fingers moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. "Bravo team, this is Phoenix Base, requesting status update. Over." Her voice carried the calm professionalism that had become her trademark, betraying nothing of the calculations running through her mind as she monitored multiple frequencies simultaneously. The response came through laced with static and the distant sound of vehicle engines. "Phoenix Base, this is Bravo Leader. Delayed by civilian convoy on Route 7. Should be back on schedule within 10 minutes. Over." Morrison nodded his approval, but Maria had already noticed something in the background noise that made her pause. A subtle pattern in the static, almost like a rhythm. She adjusted the filters, isolating different frequencies, and felt a chill run down her spine. Hidden beneath the routine communication was something else entirely: brief, coded transmissions in Arabic that shouldn't have been there. She had learned Arabic during her childhood, sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table in East Los Angeles, while the old woman shared stories of her travels as a young nurse during World War II. Abuela Elena had served in North Africa, working with resistance fighters and learning languages out of necessity. "Knowledge is power, Mija," she would say, "but sometimes it's the knowledge you keep quiet that saves lives." Now, as Maria listened to the coded chatter, her grandmother's words took on new meaning. The transmissions were brief, scattered across different frequencies, but the message was becoming clear. Someone was coordinating movement in the valley, someone who knew about Bravo team's route and timing. Sergeant First Class Danny Rodriguez leaned back in his chair at the adjacent workstation, completely oblivious to Maria's discovery. At 26, Rodriguez was the youngest member of Morrison's senior staff, known for his easy smile and his tendency to underestimate anyone who didn't match his idea of a warrior. He had made his opinions about female soldiers clear on numerous occasions, though never directly to Maria's face. "Hey Santos," Rodriguez said, spinning his chair to face her. "You think you could handle a real combat role if things got hairy? I mean, communications is important and all, but have you ever actually been in a firefight?" Maria continued monitoring the frequencies, her expression unchanged. "I go where I'm ordered, Sergeant," she replied evenly, not bothering to mention the 3 engagements she had been in during her previous deployment, or the fact that she had qualified expert with every weapon in the armory. Rodriguez chuckled, mistaking her measured response for uncertainty. "Don't take it personal. It's just that when bullets start flying, you want people who can handle the pressure. Combat's different from sitting in an air-conditioned communications center." Morrison glanced over, his expression showing mild irritation at Rodriguez's comments, but he didn't intervene. The captain had learned to pick his battles, and Rodriguez's attitudes, while outdated, didn't interfere with his ability to do his job. Maria remained focused on her equipment, but her mind was elsewhere, processing the intelligence she was gathering while simultaneously calculating response times and equipment loads. During her time at the base, she had memorized every detail of their defensive capabilities, every escape route, every piece of equipment, and its location. It was a habit born from years of training that went far beyond what the Army had provided. Her real education had begun at age 7, in her grandmother's garage, where Elena Santos had transformed an ordinary space into a training ground. The old woman had been more than a nurse during the war. She had been a fighter, trained by French resistance members and British special operations soldiers who recognized her potential. When Elena returned to Los Angeles after the war, she carried with her knowledge that she passed on to her granddaughter. "The world is not always kind to women who are strong," Elena had explained during one of their training sessions. "So we become strong in ways they don't expect. We learn to move without sound, to strike without warning, to protect without being seen as protectors." Maria had absorbed every lesson, every technique, every philosophy. She learned to read body language like others read newspapers, to detect lies and vocal patterns, to move through shadows like smoke. By the time she enlisted, she possessed skills that would have impressed Special Forces operators, but she had also learned the wisdom of concealment. The army had seen what she allowed them to see: a competent soldier with good test scores and reliable performance. They had assigned her to communications because her aptitude scores were high and the position needed filling. They had no idea they were placing a covert operative in the heart of their intelligence-gathering operation. As the morning wore on, Maria continued to monitor the suspicious transmissions while maintaining her regular duties. The pattern was becoming clearer. Someone was tracking coalition movements, someone with access to real-time information. The coded messages were brief but specific: unit numbers, timing, routes. Information that should have been classified. Lieutenant Sarah Chun approached the communications station with a stack of reports. At 25, Chun was one of only 2 other women in the squadron, and she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to navigate a male-dominated environment through competence and determination. "Santos, I need you to send these intel reports to headquarters," Chun said, handing over the encrypted files. "Priority transmission." "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied, accepting the reports while continuing to track the mysterious communications. As she processed Chen's files, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The intelligence reports contained the exact information being transmitted in the coded Arabic messages: unit positions, patrol schedules, supply convoy timing. Someone on the base was feeding information to hostile forces. Maria's training kicked in, her mind automatically shifting into the analytical mode her grandmother had taught her. She began reviewing the morning's activities, noting who had access to which information, who had been present during various briefings, who had the technical knowledge to hide transmissions within routine communications. The list was shorter than she had hoped. Morrison approached her station, coffee mug in hand. "Santos, I'm getting reports of increased chatter in the valley. Anything unusual on your end?" This was the moment Maria had been dreading since her discovery. She could report her suspicions and risk exposing knowledge she wasn't supposed to possess, or she could remain silent and hope she was wrong about what was being planned. "Sir, I've noticed some irregular patterns in background communications," she said carefully. "Nothing definitive, but it might be worth monitoring more closely." Morrison nodded, but his attention was already shifting to other concerns. "Keep an ear on it. Let me know if anything develops." As the captain moved away, Maria felt the weight of her isolation. She possessed information that could save lives, but revealing it would expose capabilities she had spent years concealing. The coded transmissions were increasing in frequency, and the pattern suggested something significant was being planned for the afternoon patrol. Bravo team was scheduled to escort a supply convoy through the mountain pass at 1400 hours. It was a routine mission, one they had completed dozens of times before, but the intelligence being transmitted suggested it would be anything but routine this time. Rodriguez stood up from his workstation, stretching and checking his watch. "Almost time for chow. Santos, you coming to the mess hall, or are you going to eat another protein bar at your desk?" "I'll grab something later," Maria replied, not wanting to leave her station while the mysterious transmissions continued. She had identified 3 possible sources for the intelligence leak, and she needed more time to narrow it down. As Rodriguez left the communications center, Maria noticed him pause at the door, glancing back at her workstation with an expression she couldn't quite read. It lasted only a moment before he continued on his way, but something about the look bothered her. The afternoon shift change brought new personnel into the communications center, and Maria began her transition briefing with Corporal James Wright, a 19-year-old from Tennessee who approached his duties with earnest determination, but lacked the experience to recognize subtle patterns in communications traffic. "Right? I'm seeing some irregular transmissions this morning," Maria said as she prepared to hand over the console. "Nothing confirmed, but worth monitoring. Frequencies 274 through 291 seem to be the most active." Wright nodded enthusiastically, making notes on his clipboard. "Got it, Sergeant. I'll keep an eye on those channels." Maria hesitated, knowing that Wright's inexperience meant he was unlikely to catch the coded transmissions she had detected. But directly briefing him on hostile intelligence gathering would require explanations she couldn't provide without revealing her Arabic language skills and her advanced training in signal analysis. As she prepared to leave her station, one final transmission caught her attention. The message was longer than the others, and, as she decoded it mentally, her heart began racing. The ambush was confirmed for today. Bravo Team's convoy route had been compromised, and the attacking force was larger than anything the base had encountered before. 23 coalition soldiers would be traveling through that mountain pass in less than 4 hours, and they had no idea they were heading into a carefully planned trap. Maria looked around the communications center, noting who remained on duty, who had access to the intelligence being transmitted, and who would benefit from the destruction of Bravo Team. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, but she still needed proof before she could act. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes, Mija, being invisible is not enough. Sometimes you must choose between hiding your strength and using it to protect others. When that moment comes, you will know what to do. The moment was approaching faster than Maria had anticipated. In 4 hours, good soldiers would die unless she found a way to stop it without destroying the careful facade she had maintained for 3 years. She had spent her entire military career being underestimated, being overlooked, being dismissed as just another communications specialist. Now, with time running out and lives hanging in the balance, Maria Santos was about to discover whether her years of hiding had been preparation for this moment, or a trap that would prevent her from doing what needed to be done. The coded transmissions continued in the background as she gathered her equipment, each message bringing the ambush closer to reality. Somewhere in the mountains, hostile forces were moving into position, confident that their intelligence was accurate and that the convoy would arrive exactly as planned. They had no idea that their carefully laid trap had been discovered by a woman they would never suspect. A woman who had spent years learning to be invisible while developing the skills to strike like lightning when the moment demanded it. Maria Santos left the communications center that afternoon carrying the weight of knowledge that could save lives or destroy her career. The choice between silence and action was rapidly approaching, and she could feel her grandmother's training stirring to life after years of dormancy. The real test was about to begin in the scorching heat of the Afghan desert, where silence often meant the difference between life and death. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had mastered the art of being invisible. Not the kind of invisibility that came from camouflage or cover, but something far more dangerous, the invisibility of being underestimated. For 3 years, she had watched her male counterparts receive commendations for skills she possessed in abundance, but never displayed. She had listened to briefings where her suggestions were dismissed, only to be praised when repeated by others. She had endured the sideways glances, the whispered doubts, the constant need to prove herself worthy of wearing the same uniform as her brothers in arms. But Maria carried secrets that could have changed everything. In the quiet moments between patrols, when others cleaned their weapons or wrote letters home, she practiced movements that flowed like water, strikes that could disable without killing, and techniques learned in a world far from the military's watchful eyes. Her grandmother's teachings, passed down through generations of women who survived by being stronger than they appeared, lived in every controlled breath, every calculated step. What her squadron didn't know was that their quiet communication specialist, the woman they barely noticed during strategy sessions, possessed skills that could turn the tide of any engagement. They saw only what she allowed them to see. A competent soldier who followed orders and kept her head down. They had no idea they were serving alongside a weapon disguised as a wallflower, a guardian angel who had been waiting in silence for the moment when hiding would no longer be an option. That moment was coming faster than anyone could have predicted, racing toward them across the desert sands like a storm that would test everything they thought they knew about survival, courage, and the woman who had been walking among them all along. The ambush that would change everything was already being planned in caves 30 miles away, and Maria Santos was about to discover that sometimes the greatest act of service requires abandoning the shadows and stepping into the light. Consequences be damned.